It started with a message that wasn't meant for me. Thursday, late, I was upstairs, finishing a report. She was downstairs, laughing on the phone. I wasn't supposed to hear it. She thought I was asleep. Her voice was lighter than it ever was with me lately. Giddy, almost unrecognizable, like a girl on her first crush. And then a name, not mine. A slip, soft and intimate, followed by silence when she realized the echo up the stairwell. I didn't say anything. Not that night. Not the next morning. Instead, I began to watch. I catalogued the invisible. She changed her perfume subtly like a test. She locked her phone but forgot the sync with our shared tablet. She smiled at text bubbles that popped up from someone saved as Monique, work. Even though she never had a colleague named Monique. She began to go out late for meetings. Started dressing like she was trying to be noticed by someone new, not loved by someone old. Still, I stayed silent. Until the invitation came, a party. Hosted by the CEO of the company she'd just been promoted in. She told me the promotion was unexpected. She cried when she told me, said I never believed in her. But the tears dried too quickly. I told her we'd go together. She paused, then smiled too wide. Agreed too easily. Something in me knew. Not the what but the who, the how. The party was a masquerade. Elegant. Eyes hidden behind lacquered masks. The kind of place where secrets aren't whispered, they're danced to. When we arrived, she vanished. Said she had to talk shop. I watched her glide through the crowd, trailing a scent I didn't recognize anymore, leaving me with a flute of champagne and a growing pressure behind my eyes. Then someone touched my elbow. "You're her husband, aren't you?" the woman said. Blonde, in her 50s. Too much red lipstick and zero subtlety. "I am," I replied. "She's upstairs," she said, not even trying to whisper. "With him. She likes power, doesn't she? She always chases the throne. Always the crown, never the man under it." I didn't ask who. I already knew. I walked upstairs, slow. The music thumped below like a heartbeat. At the end of the hallway, one door was half open. What I saw wasn't passion. It wasn't love. It was cruelty, performance, something rehearsed. She wasn't ashamed. The CEO turned his head when I entered. Laughed. "Good you're here," he said, voice like spoiled silk. "Give us a massage, loser." Behind him, I saw them. 5 men in black, lounging like kings around a chessboard, all watching me. Bodyguards? Maybe once. Now, something else entirely. I didn't respond. I stepped into the room and smiled. I didn't scream. I didn't ask why. There's a kind of silence that kills louder than any shout. Then he stood. The CEO. 6'2", broad, a jaw carved to intimidate. He stepped forward, ready to fight. But then he stopped. He looked into my eyes. And he froze. Not because I was armed. Not because I said anything. But because there was something in my expression he wasn't expecting. Something final. Something dead. He flinched. And he cried. Just a single tear. Not from regret. From fear. From knowing the game he'd been winning had just ended. And I hadn't even begun playing yet. I didn't blink. Not when he cried. Not when the others in the room began to shift, their earlier smirks faltering like candles under cold wind. I stood still, not with menace, but with precision, like someone flipping the last page of a book they'd read too many times. The story was already over. The rest was just echoes. She didn't move. She sat on the edge of a velvet chaise, legs crossed, robe half-tied like she was posing for someone who'd stopped looking. Her eyes flicked to mine, but there was no guilt. No shock, only annoyance, like I had ruined a scene she had meticulously curated. She said nothing. That was her weapon. Not rage, not lies, but silence sharpened to a blade. She knew that words would give me something to hold on to, so she gave me nothing. I turned to the CEO. He tried to recover, straightened his shoulders, smoothed his jacket, but the damage was done. He saw something in me, not a threat, not revenge. But something worse, complete emotional indifference. A man who has been hollowed out and has nothing left to lose. "All right?" he muttered, glancing at the others like he expected them to step in. They didn't. They weren't her lovers anymore. They were witnesses now, caught in a moment too raw for theatrics. I walked to the table where their drinks sat, untouched, picked up a glass. held it to the light. "What do you think happens now?" I asked, calm, crisp, like reading a weather report. None of them answered. I turned to her. "You've had your fun," I said. "I just want to know when you decided I stopped being real to you." Her lips curled, just slightly. "You always took everything so seriously," she said. And her voice was the same one she used with hotel receptionists and waiters. That was the problem. I smiled, truly smiled, because finally, she told the truth. The room felt smaller, more honest, stripped of pretense. She had revealed what I needed, not what happened, but why. She was done with me long before she touched him. I was just the museum piece she left dusting in the corner. "You can all stay," I said, nodding once toward the CEO and his ornaments of loyalty. "But you won't forget this. None of you." They didn't respond. I walked out of the room, left the door open behind me. I didn't slam it. I didn't run. I wanted them to hear every footstep, measured, calm, louder than any scream they expected. Downstairs, the party had swelled again. No one knew. No one would guess. I passed a mirror on the landing. For the first time in months, I saw myself clearly. Not the husband, not the victim, just a man no longer pretending he was still part of someone else's fantasy. That I didn't go home that night. Not because I didn't have anywhere to go, but because going home would have meant accepting that it was still mine. The house, the bedroom, the shared closet with her shoes lined like trophies from a life she curated without me. It all felt staged now, like I had been living on a set, and tonight someone ripped down the backdrop. Instead, I drove. Nowhere specific, just away, through back roads and empty highways, where the only light came from scattered gas stations and forgotten neon signs buzzing like dying insects. I wasn't trying to escape. I wasn't even thinking clearly. It was like my body kept moving just so my mind wouldn't collapse. At some point, my phone buzzed. One message. From her. A single line. "You made that weird." That was it. Not sorry. Not let's talk. Just that. As if I had disrupted her play. As if I was the interruption. I pulled over into a deserted rest stop and sat there, staring at the message until the screen dimmed itself. Then I laughed. A real laugh. Ugly and sharp. Not because it was funny, but because it confirmed everything I hadn't wanted to believe. She never loved me. Not who I really was. She loved the version of me that didn't ask questions. That paid for things, showed up on time, smiled for photos. The version that made her look good in the right light. And the second I stopped being useful for her story, she simply rewrote it. Cast a new lead, changed the genre, and kept the credits rolling. But here's the thing about being rewritten: you still remember the original script. Around 3 a.m., I found myself parked outside my brother's apartment. I hadn't seen him in 6 months. Not since our father's funeral. We had drifted. He hated small talk, and I hated talking about real things. But in that moment, he was the only name my mind trusted. He opened the door groggy, shirtless, holding a baseball bat. "Jesus," he said, lowering it when he saw me. "What the hell happened?" I walked in without answering. Sat on the couch. Stared at the black TV screen like it might start playing the scene from earlier. He didn't ask again. Just sat down beside me, waited. I handed him my phone. Let him read the message. He read it. Handed it back. "Was it the CEO?" he asked. I nodded. He let out a breath, deep and slow. "She always liked power." I looked at him, surprised. "You knew?" He didn't answer right away. Just said, "I knew she liked to be worshipped. That's not love. That's hunger." That hit me harder than anything she said. Because he was right. She hadn't married me because of love. She had married me because I fit the image. I had the right career, the steady temperament, the loyalty that looked good at cocktail parties. But I was never her equal. Just her safety net. And safety nets get cut once the acrobat thinks she can fly without them. I slept on the couch that night, shoes still on. Not because I was tired, but because my body finally stopped running. My brother didn't say another word. He just sat in the armchair keeping watch. Like he knew the storm hadn't passed. It had just started changing direction. Tomorrow I'd see her again. But I wouldn't be the man she remembered. Morning came with the dull hum of the city stirring. But my world didn't stir with it. I woke up on the couch with a stiff neck and the sharp realization that the person I had built my life around had already replaced me. Mentally, emotionally, even logistically. What I had mistaken for a crack in the wall was a collapsed foundation. My brother handed me a cup of black coffee, said nothing. He didn't need to. The silence was heavier than any advice he could offer. By noon, I was standing in the kitchen of my own house, waiting. She came in like nothing had happened. Hair perfectly straightened, gym bag slung over her shoulder, earbuds in, humming something I didn't recognize. Her eyes landed on me, and she paused. Just a beat. "I thought you'd be sulking at a hotel or something," she said, as casually as one might ask what's for dinner. No apology. No hesitation. She walked past me, opened the fridge, grabbed a bottle of kombucha, her favorite brand, the one I always stocked without being asked, and took a sip. "Let's get it over with," she said. I stayed still. "Get what over with?" I asked. "The performance. The emotional reckoning. The whole 'how could you do this to me' monologue," she said, gesturing vaguely. "Just so we can move past it and figure out what happens next." That was the moment I realized she hadn't just moved on emotionally. She had moved into a new role entirely. I was now her narrative device, a character she needed closure with so she could walk clean into the next season of her life. I stepped closer. Not threatening, just present. "You don't think I deserve more than this?" She looked at me with something between irritation and amusement. "What do you want, a confession? You walked in on it. You saw the cast. Do you want me to explain the plot twist? It's not that deep. I needed something more. And you? You were always there, always loyal, always predictable." Eventually, that became boring. I felt the words sink in. Not like daggers, but like slow poison. "And what are they?" I asked. "Those 5 men. The CO. Are they exciting? Is that all it takes?" She shrugged. "They're not anything. They're moments. And moments don't have to last to be worth it." That's when I realized something darker than betrayal had taken root in her. It wasn't infidelity, it was consumption. She consumed experiences, people, emotions, not out of malice, but because nothing was ever enough. She put the bottle down and looked at me with something faintly resembling kindness. That was worse than hatred. "I never asked you to stay," she said. No, she hadn't. But she'd built the kind of life around me that made it hard to leave. And that was her talent. Building illusions. Selling them. Living in them until they collapsed. And then walking away with no debris on her shoes. I walked to the living room, picked up the framed photo on the mantel, our wedding day. She was laughing in the picture. I was looking at her like I'd won something impossible. I turned the photo face down on the shelf. "I'm not staying," I said. She paused, like she didn't quite believe me. "Okay," she said. "Then go." But she didn't look sad. She looked relieved. And that, more than everything else, was the moment that broke me. Because she had been waiting for this ending far longer than I had seen the beginning unravel. Leaving wasn't dramatic. No suitcase thrown into the trunk. No thunderstorm crying on my behalf. It was quiet. A coat. A set of keys. A door closing with the finality of a book spine snapping shut. I didn't slam it. She didn't follow. That was the last time I saw her in our home. I didn't go far at first. Just the spare room at my brother's, a mattress with no history, a room with no echoes. It was strange how fast the silence turned from a wound into a comfort. No passive-aggressive sighs. No eyes rolling behind wine glasses. No emotional bookkeeping over breakfast. Just space. Empty, glorious space. The next few days passed in fragments. Calls from mutual friends. Hesitant. Filled with stammering curiosity masked as concern. "Hey, just heard. Is everything okay? Did something happen between you two? Are you guys, like, done?" I ignored most of them. But then came the call I didn't expect, her mother. We'd never been close. She always thought I was too quiet, too simple. Her daughter deserved a star, not a steady hand. But now her voice was brittle. "She said you embarrassed her," she said sharply. I said nothing. "She said you caused a scene in front of someone important. That you humiliated her." I still said nothing. "She's spiraling," the woman added, voice dropping. "You may think she doesn't feel things, but she does. She just doesn't show them like other people." A pause. Then the softest confession. "I don't know what she's doing anymore. She doesn't come home. Not to me. Not to anyone." That was when I realized. I wasn't the only one she had cut loose. Her hunger had swallowed everything. Friends, lovers, family. I was just the last course. But what do you do with a truth like that? Pity her? No. She chose her life, brick by careful brick. I just happened to be the man who lived in the house she built out of mirrors. The next day, I filed for separation. Quietly, cleanly. My brother helped with the paperwork. Said nothing when I hesitated before signing. I pressed the pen down harder than I needed to, and in that moment, I felt something uncoil from my spine. A pressure I didn't know had a name until it left. Freedom doesn't feel like fireworks. It feels like walking out of a room you didn't know was locked. The morning after, I drove to the beach. Alone. No bag. No plan. Just a need to hear something louder than the thoughts in my head. The waves didn't care who I was. They didn't care what I'd lost. They didn't ask why I stayed so long or why I left so late. They just moved. And as I stood there, shoes off, salt wind cutting my skin, I finally said it aloud. She never loved me. It didn't break me. It didn't crush me. It just landed in the sand like a rock dropped from a child's hand. Real. Undeniable. And strangely, freeing. A week passed. Maybe more. Time started to smear together like paint on wet canvas. There were no more morning routines. No texts asking what to pick up from the store. No passive reminders about couples brunch. Just blank space. Unstructured. Silent. And strangely merciful. One morning, I got a call from my lawyer. She had responded. Through her attorney, she requested everything. The house, the car, the vacation points, even the antique mirror my grandmother gave us. Claimed it was mutually sentimental. She wanted it all like someone ransacking a burning building, trying to salvage trinkets while the structure collapsed. I stared at the list. She wasn't trying to win. She was trying to erase me, piece by piece. My lawyer asked if I wanted to fight it. No, I said. Let her keep the spoils. He paused, then murmured, "You're either incredibly wise or incredibly done." "Both," I replied. But it wasn't just surrender. It was precision. I wanted her to have every piece of the world she'd built, every object she'd once used as proof of our life together, because I knew none of it could make her full. Her hunger didn't end with ownership. It ended with emptiness, and I was no longer part of her diet. A few nights later, I bumped into someone I hadn't seen in years. Eli, a colleague from an old job, back when I was still full of plans. He recognized me immediately, grinned wide, and offered to grab drinks. I agreed, more out of curiosity than comfort. We talked for hours, about everything except her. Then, as we parted outside the bar, he paused. "She always scared me a bit," he said. I frowned. "What do you mean?" He rubbed his jaw. "She was like a void. Beautiful, sure. Charming. But like if you looked too long, you'd lose something. You ever felt that?" I didn't answer, because I had. For years. But I'd mistaken it for love. The next day, she called. Not her lawyer. Her. It was early, still dark out. I was half awake when her name flashed on the screen, and before I could stop myself, I answered. She didn't say hello. Just, "I had a dream about you." I didn't respond. "I was drowning," she continued, voice flat. "And you were there. But you weren't saving me. You just watched." I could hear the pause. The bait. "You always expected me to pull you up," I said calmly. "Even when you were the one dragging us down." Silence. Then a whisper. "You've changed." No, I hadn't changed. I had returned. Returned to the man I was before her orbit swallowed mine. Returned to a life where my worth wasn't defined by how useful I was to someone else's story. "I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for," I said. She didn't hang up. She stayed silent for a few more seconds. Then finally, click. That was the last time we ever spoke. It's strange how pain mutates. At first, it's raw, white-hot and loud, clawing at your chest. Then it numbs, cools, settles into the spaces behind your ribs like fog. Eventually, it fades into something else entirely. Not gone, but folded into you, like scar tissue you no longer flinch at when touched. I was adjusting, quietly, not in grand leaps, but in subtle movements. I moved into a new apartment, small, unassuming, with no decorative flair. Nothing to impress, nothing to project. Just space to breathe. I furnished it with intention. No shared memories. No compromises. Just pieces I liked. For me. I went back to work full-time. Threw myself into projects with a sharpness I hadn't felt in years. My boss noticed, called it renewed clarity. I didn't correct him. The truth was simpler. I no longer lived on emotional quicksand. The uncertainty was gone. I was alone but grounded. One night as I walked home, I passed by a gallery I used to visit with her. They were hosting an exhibit, Fractures in Light. I stepped inside without thinking. The room was filled with distorted glass sculptures, lit from strange angles. Each piece cast warped shadows, fragments bending across the floor. The artist had written a note beneath one installation. "This is what remains when something breaks beautifully." I stood there longer than I meant to, not because I believed beauty always came from destruction, but because I finally understood, not all ruins are sad. Some are sacred. Some are necessary. The next week, I received an invitation. A mutual friend's engagement party. Someone who hadn't picked sides, who still didn't know the full story. I debated skipping it, but something in me said go. Not to prove anything. Just to see what it felt like to walk into a room without dragging the weight of her absence behind me. I arrived late on purpose. The room was full. Laughter, toasts, the soft blur of string lights and clinking glasses. And then I saw her. She wasn't alone. He was there, of course. The CEO, dressed too sharply, standing too straight. Her hand rested lightly on his forearm, fingers posed like ornaments. But it wasn't her presence that caught my breath. It was her eyes. They scanned the room, found me, paused. And in that flicker, just a breath's worth of time, I saw something unfamiliar. Not guilt, not regret, envy. Not for what I had, but for what I'd reclaimed. I didn't approach her, didn't nod, didn't look away either. Just let the silence speak. Let the moment stretch. And when she finally turned back to him, I realized something profound. She had moved on, but I had moved through. And those are very, very different things. 3 days after the party, I received a letter. Not an email, not a message. A real letter, handwritten, folded twice, left in my mailbox with no stamp. She had come to my door, stood outside the new place I had built, and left behind the only piece of herself she could still control. Words. I let it sit on the counter for hours. Part of me didn't want to read it. Part of me didn't want to give her the final scene she thought she deserved. But curiosity, like memory, has sharp teeth. Eventually, I unfolded it. The handwriting was familiar, elegant, sharp-edged. The letter was brief. There are versions of us in other lives where this didn't happen, where I didn't lose you, where you didn't stop waiting. I see them sometimes in dreams. They laugh more. They forgive easier. But this version, the one we lived, was too honest, too bare. Maybe that's why it collapsed. You were the only thing I couldn't manipulate. That scared me. So I tried to break you before you could leave me. You didn't break. You just left. No signature. No, I'm sorry. Just a confession disguised as closure. I burned it in the sink. Watched the paper curl, turn black, vanish into ash. Not because I hated her. Not even out of anger. But because it was never about what she did, it was about what I allowed. For too long I accepted half-love. Performances. Games. I let someone rewrite my worth through their own fractured mirror. And the moment I stopped accepting that role, the entire illusion crumbled. I wasn't sad. I wasn't triumphant either. I was clean. That night I did something strange. Something small but symbolic. I made dinner for myself. Not takeout. Not a rushed sandwich. I cooked. Slow, deliberate, every movement mine. I plated it with care. Poured a glass of wine I actually liked. Put on music that filled the silence without needing to drown it. I sat at the table, alone, and I was full. Not because the food was perfect, but because, for once, the room didn't feel empty. It felt earned. Spring arrived like a whispered apology. The kind that doesn't fix anything but makes the cold easier to forget. I started running again, early mornings, when the streets were still wet with dew and the city hadn't yet remembered to wear its mask. I liked the silence of that hour. Felt honest. The world, stripped of distraction, just movement and breath. One morning, on a path near the river, I saw a couple arguing. She was turned away from him, arms folded tight, his voice rising. trying to reach her through the wall she had clearly spent years building. I didn't slow down. I didn't stare. But in that moment, I saw myself from a year ago, frozen in that same dance, pleading for clarity from someone who had long ago stopped listening. I ran faster. A week later, I got a message from an unfamiliar number. Polite, cautious. "Hi, I'm one of the security staff from the party. I've been meaning to reach out." At first, I thought it was a scam, but curiosity pressed back. I replied. He called. "I wasn't sure if I should," he said. "But I saw what happened that night. You walked into a room and didn't blink. That did something to me. I didn't understand." He continued. "She used people like scenery. I thought I was different. I wasn't. None of us were. We weren't lovers. We were her audience." It was strange to hear it from someone else, like reading a diary you didn't know you shared with strangers. "I left," he said, "after that night. Walked off the payroll. I just wanted you to know. Not everyone stayed." I thanked him. He didn't ask for anything. Not forgiveness. Not understanding. Just closure. I ended the call and stared out the window. The street below was blooming. Trees dusting green into the gray. Renewal. Not forced. Just patient. And I realized something profound. She wasn't the storm. She was the season. And seasons end. I wasn't healed. Not entirely. Grief doesn't vanish, it morphs. But I had become fluent in my own silence. I no longer waited for apologies that would never come. No longer fed on the fantasy that love could survive on one person's effort. That night, I opened the box. The last box from our life. Stuffed with old notes, vacation receipts, a photo of us at some vineyard I no longer remembered. I went through each item slowly. Not to mourn, but to learn. When I finished, I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just closed it, taped it shut, and wrote one word on the lid. Done. Then I carried it down to the building's donation center. Not the trash, because even pain deserves to be passed on, not buried. The anniversary came and went. Not a wedding anniversary, those don't matter once the ink dries. But the anniversary of that night. The night the masks came off. The night the real story began. I didn't light a candle or raise a glass. I didn't scroll through old photos or sit in nostalgic torment. I went for a walk. No destination. Just motion. The world was moving again, and so was I. Halfway through the walk, I passed a bookstore. One of those quiet, independent places tucked between bigger things. I stepped inside without a plan. Wandered through the shelves, trailing fingers across spines like feeling for a pulse. That's when I saw a journal, leather-bound, unmarked. I bought it. No big revelation. No symbolic tear in the eye. Just something simple, something mine. Later that night, I opened the first page and wrote. She taught me everything I never wanted to learn about love. Not to damn her. Not even to exorcise her. But to acknowledge the truth of it. Some lessons arrive dressed as disasters. Some people enter our lives not to stay, but to unmake us so we can build again without illusion. In the months that followed, I found a rhythm. Not the one I had before her. Not the one I had with her. A new one. I took a trip alone, just a few days up north, near the mountains. No itinerary, no companion. Just a borrowed cabin, a stack of books, and the sound of wind threading through pine. I hiked. I cooked for myself. I stared into fires and wrote in silence. And I felt, for the first time in a long time, like a person who wasn't carrying anyone else's story inside him. Not hers. Not the one I pretended to live. Just mine. One evening, while sitting on the porch with tea in hand, I watched the sun sink behind a ridge. The sky cracked into colors I didn't have names for. And for a moment, I remembered her laugh. Not the fake one. The real one. The one from before everything turned into performance. And I felt nothing. Not hatred. Not regret. Just a calm acceptance that even poison has its season. I finished my tea, went inside, and wrote one last entry. I used to think survival was about holding on. But maybe it's about letting go fully finally. Maybe the real strength is walking away without the need to be seen, heard, or avenged. Just gone. Alive. Whole. That was the final chapter. And I didn't need a sequel.